Hi all, I have another fantastic game to show you today. So the mighty Stockfish chess engine, the top rated chess engine in the world, who actually in this tournament in the Chess.com Computer Championship has yet to lose a single game. So it's proven to be one of only two engines so far that hasn't taken a single loss in many games so far, approaching the midpoint. So anyway, Leela playing black against Stockfish. I was really concerned about this game because Leela had taken a hit against the amazing ethereal chess engine in an earlier round, and I thought that playing black might be a bit dodgy, especially against Stockfish. Also, I have to note I had a particular question in mind. So I've recently played kind of a very strong bullet tournament against every single opponent in it, a titled player, and I did reasonably well, came about 60th out of 290, 61st out of 290. I was very happy. I beat a few GMs on the way, but I did notice in my own games, and this is the question for this video, which you might be interested in, I wanted to answer this particular question: how can you stop yourself, with black especially, being opened up and destroyed? It might be a question of interest to those playing black against very strong tactical opponents. So I thought this is an interesting role model game, because actually Stockfish does play the very sharp e4. So we say sharp when we mean, you know, those positions we can easily just lose quite quickly with one, you know, inaccurate move, because often king safety and line opening come together. So I was interested in what sort of strategies Leela will come up with to sort of neutralize, you know, this peak classical, what I call classical chess engine, based on, you know, Turing's original paper chess computer with heuristics. This is taking the classical approach to the limits. Stockfish is actually a really beautiful, many programmers involved in it, beautiful thing, and also almost self-evolving, because it's very easy for them to upgrade with new ideas. It seems they have the same major, you know, the test framework which Ethereal shares now as well, that kind of fast evolution characteristic. So this was very interesting because Leela chose c5. I believe Leela isn't as evolved yet as AlphaGo, just simply because of the opening choice. Because in this tournament, they're not given opening moves; they choose their own. And I believe when Leela gets to AlphaGo, she will discover the Berlin defense with black, which is also, of course, the preference of most super GMs playing against e4 to neutralize White's initiative. Now, okay, that's not such a well-kept secret that the Berlin's pretty solid, and if you want to neutralize all the tactical pressure, you do that. But what about with the Sicilian? So here is really my question, still kind of valid if you want to play something which might, initially at least, lead to sharp positions. So we go into actually potentially a knight off, because after knight c3, Leela plays a6, inviting a transposition route to the main knight off, which is what I consider the Rolls Royce of all Sicilian defences, and sharp. Okay, so there was one year Gelfand was doing extremely well in Sicilian defences with black, beating quite a few super grandmasters. So it's a viable opening, but gravitation at the super GM level is now on the Berlin with black, it seems. Anyway, here we have h3. Now this move goes back to the 70s. Fischer used this in a number of key games, this idea, and then it was revitalized by Vishy Anand in recent years. So it's become kind of trendy all of a sudden again. So h3, how to react to this? I was kind of relieved because I felt this is a kind of positional game, in theory, which Leela could do well in, as long as her king could be kept intact, and maybe to keep things closed. But how to keep things closed? And I think what we're about to see is a good lesson in that. Let's see, e5, knight d, e2. I'd just like to say, let's look out for this. I think one of the key things is to lock down pawn breaks to keep a position closed. That's my conclusion, but I want to share with you the specifics in this game now. Let's take that as the premise. So one pawn move which could be aggressive is g4 for g5, bishop g2, no, controlling d5 more, and that's actually shut down with h5. Now this might seem peculiar to you, but it's actually the main move in ChessBase Livebook here to stop this g4. So that's very interesting. So b5, g4, you know, white's getting what they want here, basically. More space potentially, maybe even f4 later, but this grip on d5 makes positional sense. So h5, clamping down on g4. This clamping of pawn breaks, pawn moves, I think is one primary method of keeping a position closed. So that's my personal question that I really wanted answered by this game. g3, we have bishop e7, bishop g2, and also this bishop, if it can be kept kind of imprisoned by its own pawn, that'll be good news. Exchanging off this bishop for this one later, I thought would be a good strategic goal. We have b5, knight d5. Now here's a little bit of scariness after knight takes. I thought it would be really comfortable for e takes. That would soak up the pressure, shield the d6. Maybe this bishop can exchange off at some point with this one. This would be fine, but white keeps the outpost square open for pieces, hitting the rook. And now quirky looking rook a7, but it does the job. Bishop e3. Now there is a tactical issue here to be aware of. On rook c7, then there's bishop b6, and that's unfortunately losing the exchange in the game. Rook d7 might actually be palatable, but I believe it's actually preferable. This scenario is okay, but it's a small inch for white. I think what was played is preferable, which is rook b7 supported by the bishop, and supports b4 basically. Be able to answer a4, sometimes by b4, especially with the bishop here on enclosed by its own pawn. You know, a6, this structure on the light squares isn't so sensitive. We have queen d2, knight d7, knight c3, knight f6. So parrying in advance this knight d5 to be able to exchange that off. Also, there's a little trick here, I believe. If bishop g5, then immediate b4. Then if knight d5, bang, knight takes, hitting the bishop. You know, this would be a disaster for white. It would be an absolute disaster. Or bishop takes here, then there's knight takes, so that would be losing a piece. Now, funny enough, Stockfish is not going to go in for that. So a3 is played, because strategically that is sometimes of interest to take off the knight to get a nice post on d5, but it's not possible here. So a3, a cautious looking move. If white castles as an alternative, to allow black to play b4 here, this exchange off of knights, h4 to try and keep the pawns on light squares to keep the bishop enclosed, is actually, I believe this is an even possession here, even if black does castle kingside. So anyway, a3, we have bishop e6, f4. Okay, now this is getting a little bit scary again, I thought, because there are dual possibilities of maybe f takes on f5, and if the bishop goes to c4, what about things like b3? Leela actually plays a5. I'm not really concerned about f5. As long as she doesn't put the bishop on c4, I don't think it's a big problem. In fact, white did play, Stockfish did play f5. So bishop c4, I think, runs into b3. This is undesirable fundamentally. So we have the bishop retreating, but the pawn is still protected by sufficient to go here and to actually reroute here to put pressure on the central square. And that is a classic. If you look at the classic Sicilian defense games, for example, Tal playing black against Fischer would often try and put pressure on this diagonal. So it's a classic recipe to fight for central control, and we have that now. After knight d5, we have this battle over d5 especially. Queen takes, keeping the outpost, queen b8. White castles, rook c7, so you can see an echo now of bishop c6 to start to put pressure on this diagonal, and not committing to castling. c3, now really interesting, rook c4. This is committal in a sense, because is the rook going to be stranded there, especially with a bishop c6 plan? Now I thought the only remedy for that is locking down with a4, and this lockdown of b3 for, you know, b3 basically keeps the position kind of closed as well, of course. And black, if ever black plays b4, then there's tactical liabilities clearly, even if the queen wasn't there. It opens up things. So to keep the position closed here, which was my real question of interest, what happens? Let's see, queen b7, beautiful play, beautiful, bishop c6, so forcing white into a retreat, but this also prevents b4. But now, this is a necessary move, but I felt, even if Leela's been really outgunned in terms of millions of positions being examined per second, if the position is closed, and especially if you can stop all the major breaks, then you stop being, I believe, opened up like a can of sardines. That's what we don't want with black. We don't want to be opened up with like a can of sardines, basically. So this looks weird. It's denying the minority attack. But maybe with black, sometimes we can forego the minority attack, as is the case here, just to keep other aspects of the position going. Now, this bishop is enclosed. We really want to exchange off this bishop. So we do get a masterclass in positional play, h4, to try and get the pawns on light squares a bit more. And now here, king's safety is a major issue, especially with a lurking g5. Now, Leela plays a move I didn't really anticipate, and it's spectacular in a nifty kind of way. I wonder if you can guess it here, if I give you 5 seconds to pause video. Black to play and sort out king's safety. Okay, king d7, the king sorts itself out. No need to use the castling option, the flash castling option. The king is going to walk by itself here to the queen side. It's safe enough to do it at this moment because the pawn breaks have been locked down. The only thing really as scary is g5. On castling, let's look at a scenario if black castled, which I don't believe is that pleasant because we've got a dislocated pawn. One issue with g5 is this pawn becomes vulnerable. So for example, this continuation is favourable to white, not because black immediately gets checkmated, just because losing the pawn, and that's going to be a small edge for white. So h4 is the immediate downside of that. So king d7, so there's an issue with the h pawn to be aware of now. King h2, and now g5 kind of says to the h pawn, you have to be supported by pieces. That's one difference now with the other pawns. All the other pawns have got fellow pawns supporting them, but the h pawn needs piece support here, and it's been kind of cut off, especially after f6. So this neutralizes ideas of f6 blasting down the f file, opening the f file up tactically. Could be in white's favour here, especially with the rook on c4. It's not participating, so any doubling of rooks on the f file, this is going to be very difficult to parry. So this is a necessary evil move in closing the bishop temporarily. The bishop can still reroute via d8 to b6 at some point, but this pawn is a serious concern in the position. We have rook d8. Now, I felt during the stream that any time something takes there might be d5, but then I noticed there's queen h7, so this is actually quite tricky. Does the pawn explicitly need to be protected, or is black always reacting with d5? That was a big recurring question here. White for the moment clamps down on d5 break, rook h8, and we have some shuffling now. So we have some shuffling. Bishop d8, I predicted this kind of positional maneuver to try and get the bishop to a more active diagonal. So whilst d6 is not so is not such an issue, this can be occurred. This strategic exchange of bishops is happening, and I felt a little bit more at ease with the position. Taking off the bishop pair from Stockfish is another way of neutralizing the tactical pressure, because the bishop pair, they like cover for each other's blind spots, literally. The light square bishop is kind of blind on the dark squares and vice versa. So by taking out the bishop pair and now putting more pressure, mathematically all of black's pieces generally are hitting e4 here now, putting pressure on e4 and supporting d5. In fact, all of them are involved in either one or the other here, and all of white's pieces similarly are focused on stopping d5, so we have a kind of big tug of war going, but in the mix is this h pawn. Can that ever be taken advantageously? Now rook d8 here anticipates the option at least for rook h8. So white doesn't yet attack the pawn. It's a bit of shuffling. So we've got a big tug of war here. And here protecting the pawn, saying I can protect the pawn if needed. Now actually you'll note, by the way, that here there's rook d8. It's sorry, this position there's always rook h8, but this position here, okay, rook d8 has got the possibility of rook h8 to queen f2. So rook h8 there. Now this unveils a plan, a shuffling plan to put a rook on g4, which does seem scary potentially, but that's not actually, that shuffling plan isn't yet used. Look, I can move my queen to h8 as well. Some showing off here by Leela. Now the pawn is explicitly protected. I do not I am unsure myself of allowing this sack because of queen h7. If any d5 is of interest, I don't believe it's actually worth it. So we have actually rook h8, just explicitly protecting the pawn. That seems safe and secure. But there is still a keen interest potentially in d5 at the right time. It's just when will that time arrive, if ever? That's the big question. Will black ever be able to play d5? Because d5 functionally undermines these pawns. It weakens f5. That's the key pawn. It immediately weakens, and if that drops, then that drops. So it's still in black's interest to play for d5, just from a structural undermining perspective of these pawns. So white is trying to keep a lock on that and keeping an eye, a keen interest in the right opportunity to win h4. Now, yes, this shuffling for rook g4 adds some concern, but now Leela takes the opportunity actually for a queen exchange. And in fact, we have an amusing scenario where the king can also participate in playing for d5 now. And note with this lockdown, white's never worried about either b3 or b4 because en passant on b4. B3 AB. So Leela's really taken what is a razor sharp opening and kept it ultra positional, and actually by manually moving the king to the queen side sorted out king safety concerns. So the things we're most scared about in the Sicilian defence, she's really solved a lot of the key problems, keeping it very, very positional. In fact, now even playing d5 as a sacrificial amazing pawn sack to weaken white structure, temporary pawn sack, gives the lovely blockade square of d6. So white doesn't want to give up f5 here in a hurry, so protects that. But now there's this lovely blockade square, and white's really tied down with minimal prospects now in this position. We have actually king e3, perhaps something like rook protecting. There might even be the possibility of sacking an exchange sometimes to hit f5. For example, this could be desirable. So it seems actually it's safer in a sense to play king e3 to be able to hold f5 if there's ever an exchange sack. So here though, so Leela's sacrifice pawn, you might wonder, well, why exactly? You can see that there's always pressure now on f5 here. So white's pieces are kind of tied down to protecting pawns. It is a wonderful positional pawn sack, and white returns the favour here with bishop d3. If we look at this position, instead of bishop d3, I think black can just shuffle basically without penalty. There isn't anything that white's able to constructively do that easily. As long as black doesn't take on as long as black doesn't take here, this is not a good idea. Black played rook c5, but if black takes here, then this is in white's favour after hg. This position is just in white's favour. This is not going anywhere. This pawn's loose. So no, the idea, rook c5, keep the pressure. So white is tied down to f5 and d5. It's a very comfortable looking position with everything really closed down. Leela's actually really made this a positional opening. But white kind of helps, I believe, with that early h3 move, to be fair. So, but if you can get this lockdown with black, just to comfortably have that sense of security. Now here is white's pawn sacrifice, bishop d3, really offering d5. Doesn't seem to be anything else to do, so that was just given up to at least create the possibility, for example, of rook b4 here. It's giving black something to worry about. Bishop d7, we have rook f2. And now some more shuffling. So, is black worried? As Alfred E. Newman might have said in Mad Magazine, what me worry? Okay, what me worry here? Okay, keeping an eye on f5 keeps white down. White's prospects very minimal. There's no major entry point on the d file. c4 break seems a bit far away. Now the rook on g5, by the way, is funnily placed. Anytime the bishop moves, then it can infiltrate. It looks as though almost like it's trapped or something, but it doesn't seem to be that a big a deal. Basically, its location. So we have a long period of shuffling, which kind of shows that white can't really do anything that's constructive here. But I will highlight something which I did notice as a plan coming up. So we have an exchange of rooks finally here. So this is at move 130, an exchange of rooks. Now, this is interesting because it emerges here as ideas of bishop b1, but also potentially a king coming to b3. And there's a fascinating line I have for you here. One of the few actually alternate major lines I want to show you here. Bishop a2 was played. Now let's test the hypothesis of the king walk, and I can give you a scenario I've analysed with Stockfish 9 here. So we want to try and get the king to b3. How viable is that as a winning attempt with black? Let me show you. This didn't happen, but let's say king d6. Let's say king c5, and let's plunge in with the king. The problem is these pawns are picked off basically, and we see this. And it actually just keeps the game in the variation this is a very deep variation. It just keeps the game basically in balance, because then this rook is picked up. This position ends up, believe it or not, being equal in any case. It's just an even position. White just keeps the checks. It should be an even position. So that is a scenario which really doesn't seem to show. It shows some evidence that the king walk might not be that viable. White has got these advanced pawns, which, although are liabilities, do mean this is quite dangerous, especially this g6 pawn. If ever g7 goes, this is an extremely dangerous scenario of very quickly promoting pawns, basically. They're quite advanced already. So the bishop goes to a2. Now we have, again, a period of more shuffling. Now there's a possibility of sacking for h3, which is dangerous if the king's a bit far away from h1. We have c4. So white plays another very, very interesting move, temporary pawn set there, which ties down black now to d5 a bit. And the king, is it going to infiltrate? Is this scary again? Check. Now king d7, saying, look, I can even play king d7, I don't need to play the check. King comes into d5, but now check. And now Leela's idea, rook takes g4. This does seem to be equalizing with precise follow-up, which is not h3 immediately, but bishop g2. On h3, this loses because, can you see what white plays here, which wins? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. White's plan win. Key move, which shows the dangers of these advanced pawns. Okay, g5, yeah, because there's a breakthrough here. The king is overloaded, can't rescue against this. So, for example, here loses the bishop, or here taking. Then there's f6, and here just taking, and that's crashing through queening. It's just hopeless. We can just pick off this. Just take the bishop there, pardon me. So we have bishop g2, which is the precise move to play in this position, releasing the king of its responsibility, so it's still able to handle g5 here. We have rook d1 check. On rook takes c4, just to show the dangers of black's pawn, here king e7 is a key move, and black is actually doing very well here. Black has a winning position there, I believe. So white's got to be also careful, because these two connected pass pawns, and white's got to be careful as well, clearly. So we have g5 on h2 here, by the way, rook h4. This position again is very, very good for white. And if here, I mean, there's actually no stopping this. Really, there's no bishop d5. This is also queening, because the pawns stop the king from stopping the pawn queening. So we have actually rook d1 check. Stockfish finds a cruel way to ensure the draw with the check here, and black can't really do anything about this after check. It's too risky to do anything else here. So king e7, accepting the perpetual checks. Actually, there are some interesting resources to explore in this final position if black tries to avoid the perpetual. Let's have a look at some of them. Rook e6 check. If king f8, white plays actually king d6 here. And now after h2, king d7 threatens rook e8 checkmate. Black might try this, but it doesn't help. After rook takes, there's still rook c8 checkmate. So queening, rook c8 checkmate. So that's not a very pleasant line at all after king d6. Here, if the nifty bishop d5 to try and drag the king and play h2 with the rook there, white plays the very cruel king d7 here with the idea of rook e8 checkmate. And after the takes, alas, e7 is check, and then mating, whatever way it's cut here. If king d8, then here g5 for white is strong, actually. If h2, g takes simply, allowing the queen. This position is actually, the thing is, although there's a check after king b5, there isn't too much to worry about. So here, this is actually very, very good for white. This scenario, white queens and is soon threatening to checkmate. So after this check, rook e7 check here, and if king here, queen e6 is checkmate. So there are very interesting scenarios, and a very interesting one which is easy to overlook here, by the way, is king d6. You might think with the idea of rook takes f6. In fact, black triumphs here after h2, because after rook takes f6 with the idea of rook f8 check, g takes, you might think g7, but in fact black to play. Can you see how black wins this particular position? If I give you 5 seconds, black to play and win. Okay, bishop d5. Yeah, this is unfortunate. So it's stopping the queen, and also make sure that black queens with check. So this scenario is just hopeless for white. So there's some interesting resources even in the final position when they had agreed to draw by perpetual check. So interesting stuff there. That's really like what that ends. That actually, funny enough, is one of the more tactical moments of the entire game. It seems right at the end. So a fascinating encounter. Hope you enjoyed it as much as me. Okay, comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks so much.